Hello there. I am your moderator, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by the automation wayfarer, Samit Halvadia. How you doing?
I am doing well. I like that we've gone to like two-word adjectives
Oh
now.
yeah,
It's
we
not
have to
just honorable.
step it up, man.
The automation wayfarer. I
I
will
also
help you like
appreciate that we've
Moana
set the
style.
standard. We now have a standard set up in terms of introducing you. Jeff Ulatowski of VMware was having to really reach deep in his intro for you.
He was. Whenever we do sessions together now, it's either honorable or venerable, or there's some new adjective in there,
Mhm.
courtesy of you, Sage. So thanks
Oh
for
yeah.
starting that, I
Oh
think.
yeah, I had to. And we're also joined by, you get this one too, Doug Brown, the prolific Doug Brown, who you may recognize from his efforts in the EUC space under the DABCC banner, his experience with companies like iGel, Citrix, and now as the vice president of community at ControlUp. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Thank you very much.
And today we're going to be diving deep into the EUC community, Doug's experience through the years, and just get some really good community stuff going around the EUC space because I think that's something. I'm new to the EUC space, and something that I've definitely noticed is how interconnected it is and how everyone is very friendly and open to newcomers, as well as bringing everyone into the fold into what it means to be in the EUC space.
It's really interesting because I think I just started in the EUC space, about 2 decades ago, but I've always considered myself like a fringe outsider in the EUC space because I've never cared about workspace delivery as much, traditional VDI. I've always kind of skewed towards the app side.
Mm-hmm.
So even in my first role when I was at Install Shield before it became Macrovision, then Acresso, then Flexera, and all of the different names that it went through and all the different iterations, when I just started, the EUC community sharing was starting to take off. Do you remember that, Doug? So like I
Of
remember like
course.
Bob Kelly, IT Ninja, IT
Mm.
Toolbox, and some of these sites had just started kind of popping up to help sysadmins and virtualization and Citrix admins at the time. It wasn't VDI, but it was, XenApp or CPS or even MetaFrame, WinFrame. But that's when it kind of just started around 2002, 2003, 2004 that you started seeing this, just little sites. And then I'm going to defer to you on this here, Doug, but then came the big ones, right? Then all of a sudden, Doug came out with the ABCC radio. Brian came out with Brian Madden's blog, right? You saw Sean Bass come out with his own blog, and these started becoming kind of community resources to not only just solve some of these problems, but what was kind of the inflection point for you, Doug, to say, actually, I've seen all these disparate sites. I'm going to try to create something that's going to change the community because whether Brian says he did it first or you say you did it first, I always remember DABCC radio because that was the first thing that I've ever been a part of when it came to the community.
If you look at, like you mentioned, 2002, 2003, 2004 is when you started seeing stuff pop up.
Yeah.
What else happened at that time? Two things: Google Blogger and WordPress. Right. So it
Mm.
became easy to start blogging in an affordable way online. Right. The ABCC actually started, I know the date because I registered my domain the same date and in the whole 9 yards. January 12th, 1999. So, and that was a result of a few things, but it was really a result of Jim Kinzig's Thin List, which was a listserv. And that's how all of us learned Citrix in the early days is, you joined a listserv, and then you asked a question, and that went out to everybody via email, basic listserv for those who remember listservs, right? And but there was no front end, there was no archival piece to it, right? You had to go through your email
Mm.
and find an answer. So I was like, well, hey, I'll build a website. At the same time, I was learning web servers, or I wanted to learn web servers, so it made sense to bring one up. The goal was never to do what it became. It was more just, to share resources with my friends, which were these guys in the Thin List.
I
And
love
part
that.
of that, Doug, right? Like if you think about the fact that at that time, your role is very different than it is now, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
were in the field. I mean, I believe you were Citrix SE of the Year a couple of times.
No,
actually.
that was late once, but not a
Okay.
couple. But that was years late. That was later. I joined Citrix in 2001. Back then, we were just engineers. We were consultants, engineers in the trenches, right? And trying to make MetaFrame work. Trying to make WinFrame work. I always make the if you want to play trivia, I got one that'll stump everyone. What did Service Pack 5 Beag do? It gave us printer support for WinFrame. That was such a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Just like before that, you could hack printers to work, somewhat, but now we had, the drivers work, right? Great, So those are the days when, you literally had a few people around that knew, were some guys that knew it all, and then other people that knew little bits about little pieces, and we just gathered together. We didn't call it community. We didn't think of us as, influencers or monetizing it. We were just guys trying to make stuff work, right? And that's where it all sort of came from, right? And there was in the industry as a whole, in the world, there was no such thing as these people. The web was very, very simple. There was no social media, nothing, right?
Better
and I mean,
times.
from that perspective, right? I mean, Sage, you might not even remember that, right? Before social media.
I do, because I grew up very poor. we had one computer in the house, and it was an old one.
That's right. I mean, well, you were constantly moving from place to place, right? So you definitely had a slightly different experience in your youth than a lot of us have, which is just,
I didn't have a Facebook until 2012.
That's impressive. I mean, from a community perspective too, though, like I remember one of the things that was so great about it was that eventually it started kind of skewing towards being sponsored by vendors, and we all vendors are kind of critical of that, like that they're guilty of saying, well, no, we're trying to do right by the community, but ultimately we want to promote our own agenda as an ISV. But initially when that happened, that didn't really exist. It was literally, I can't package this application. And someone would say, take these pieces out, or I'm having a problem with my MetaFrame deployment because it's not able to connect to this component. And there would actually be, it's almost like an Ask Jeeves, but with people that were, going back to those days, the Ask Jeeves, but it was people that were actually trying to solve customer problems for each other. It was for the community, by the community. And I think that we lost a little bit of that probably around 2004. Doug, I don't know what your thought is around where the community started evolving.
I think it's always alive and well. It's helping each other. That's still there, and you see it all over the place. Of course, it started becoming monetized, right? Because people realized they could start making money off of this stuff, right? And vendors had money, so that, or money to spend on us, right? So that definitely changes it. But I don't think sharing a vendor story is a bad thing, as long as you don't prioritize vendors over other vendors in a negative or in a purposeful negative way in order for your horse to win the race, right? I've always looked at throw it all out there, because I'm going to say, wow, this one solves this problem. Oh, I didn't know about this one. I want to do that stuff. I like walking around exhibit halls. Right. So on the web, it's just DABCC was very vendor centric, right? But it was everything. I didn't say, look, this one's better than these guys and this is better than this. On the podcast, we, hey, what do you do? How do you do it? And just let the people figure that out from the vendor side of it. But there was still always that helpful out there, and as you started moving up I won't say up the ranks, but maybe in age or whatever, you started moving away from some of that low level techie stuff that, and so in your turn, you got into more advertising, if you want to call it, vendor solutions, right? So but that down at that base, it's still there. You see it all over the place, right? Look at Christian Brinkhoff. He's a great example of this, right? Nowadays he's, the powerhouse of Microsoft. But where did he start? He started, I don't know the year, but quite late. But his articles were all how-to techie articles, right? It always starts there, and then it grows, right? Yeah. He's a great example of that.
That's a great point. I mean, even now in his role over at Microsoft, principal PM of Windows 365, and all three new features like boot to PC and the community engagement, all of this stuff is not necessarily around, espousing that you need to buy Windows 365. It's more along the lines of, here's a demo of frontline workers, 3 licenses for the price of 1, and ultimately you get 8-hour shifts and a persistent experience. Well, that solves a real use case, right? Like, so I think when you start thinking about the evolution of the community, I think it's actually become a pretty good blend of both. There were times where it was maybe between 2000 and 2004 and 2010, where it was the highest bidder got the loudest noise inside of the community to an extent. And I think that that's kind of course corrected a little bit, because now the user groups are demanding technical content, really great case studies, and actual life. This is how we've solved the problem. And I think that that adjustment back to real life scenarios has been a good one for us, because I do believe that, with Mark T leaving and some of the stuff that's happened in virtualization between, let's call it 2016 up until the pandemic, everyone had kind of lost their way a little bit. I don't know if you feel the same way around traditional VDI there, Doug.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I think that the growth of technology starts off, there's an explosion of things. And then, the vendors sort of work themselves out, and then you get, the one solution. This is the blessed solution, how we're going to do it. And then you get to the years where you're growing, gradually, you're figuring out and fixing all this explosion and settling down the problems, right? You know what I'm trying to say? And then you have another growth spurt with another technology that comes around and totally disrupts things. But if we just keep going like this, you're going to have disasters everywhere. Yeah. It has to settle, right? We have to work out the bugs, because it is such a, if you started off this podcast talking about, the type of people that are in EUC. I've always seen this too. And I think that the reason we have this cool blend of people is because we are hugely disruptive technology. That's our foundation. The people that loved, that found WinFrame and said, this is going to be my career. Yeah. Those were outliners, the seniors when I was, starting doing Citrix work laughed at me, right? They were doing Novell.
Yeah, right.
Should I say anything else? Yeah. So you got this type of person, right? But it is a disruptor, and it does. So you're going to have these periods that go like this, right? And I think that the years you said were these periods.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
When NVIDIA. Yeah, think of what NVIDIA came around with GPUs. It was like, oh my Lord. And then it sort of settled down. We're going to make this work now. Yeah. Right. So I don't know if I'm right, but that's how I see it.
It's a fair point, right? I mean, the announcement of technology and the introduction of technology is always met in our community with a huge amount of excitement around the theoretical innovation, but it's also met with a balanced view of, I have real customers and I cannot afford the risk of this just falling on its face, right? So, it does become a striking balance of excitement around the innovation versus maturation of the platform, maturation of the technology based on real life implementations. Because the only way to get those data points, Doug, you can't do it in a lab, right? You have to do it in the field. And that's where you and I have gotten a lot of our battle scars from.
Yeah.
When you look at stuff like as someone that has been so entrenched in all aspects of like the EUC space, but now you're very focused on community, how's that kind of evolved through your time at DABCC, starting the podcast, then going to where you are now?
That's a good question. So, all I wanted to be in life was a really great engineer. I think I started off as a programmer. So I started with computers when I was 6 years old, and this is 1977 when, nobody had computers, right? But my father was a computer guy, and so I was introduced to him, and I wanted to be a programmer. And then I realized in 1989 when I graduated high school, in university they're teaching you COBOL and Fortran, and I didn't want to do that, right? So I got into tech and started going down this this path. And all I wanted to be in life was a great engineer. And then I got a call from Citrix and said, how would you like to come work here? I was doing, like we talked about, I was one of these few guys who were sharing and what have you, because not because I was cool, because I needed to figure out how it worked. Right. Yeah. And then when I joined Citrix, they said to me, you're a pre-sales engineer. I said, what's that? And they said, well, we don't touch keyboards. And I was like, ooh, and I almost quit. I literally called up a couple of friends and said, I don't think this is for me. I'm an engineer. I'm that bigoted engineer. If you're not an engineer, you're an idiot. That's where I was and mentally. And I had and all three of the folks I called said, you don't want to, you like this, you like presenting, you like talking about technology. Now you get the chance to turn other people on to what you love. Stick with it, give it a little bit of time and see if you like it. So I was like, okay, those people definitely earned my trust. I'm sitting here today because of those people. And so I gave it some time and I loved it. And so it was a progression, right? Yeah. Steve Jobs talks about the dots in his famous commencement speech, right? If you look back, if I would have looked at the dots heading forward in my career, I would have laughed at you. I'm a VP of communities. You get out of my face, but looking back on it, it makes all the sense. It was one step after another. And community, and the way I ended up at this community is really interesting. It's actually a podcast I had sort of been playing with the idea that I saw the benefit of community, right, through these years. I saw the benefit of together. I saw the benefit of E2E and Bri Forum and how these people would get together and exchange ideas, of going outside to, in my days, to have a cigarette and have 5 people around you that were all sharing ideas. I saw that in the power of it, that I sort of thought it would be really great if you can bring this to a software company. Maybe we can actually have an organized community. You have the CUGCs and the Microsoft stuff. Those are huge, right? Yeah. But let's say for a small little company to then go and energize and share with and give knowledge and help the folks in the trenches that aren't given that love, right? So I was doing a podcast with Jed Ayers, the CEO at IHL. He had just started. He was the CMO and the president of America at the time. And the podcast had a bunch of static. So he said, I told him, I was like, hey, let's not do this. Let's reschedule. And he said, well, I'll give you a call and I'll tell you the backstory. And I was like, I love that. Those are the fun calls. Those are the ones I loved with, right? So tell me what you're not telling other people. So he told me this stuff. And I said, Jed, I know this. I was like, I know what IGEL does. He said, the problem is, it, Samit knows it, Brian knows it, Dave, John knows it, but the world doesn't. And I sort of made an arrogant comment probably. And I said, well, hire me. I'll change, I'll tell the world, and he said, oh, you want to come here? And I also saw Visa too. And so I ended up there, but he asked me, what do you want to do here? And I said, I want to build a community. And then he asked what, and I explained it to him like I sort of explained it now. He said, great, go do it. And he supported me. And the biggest thing about the IGEL community, and what we saw through that, and now we're the same type of community within ControlUp, is that it's not a marketing driven one. It's not a sales driven one. It's not, how can we get more? Mm-hmm. It's how can we help these guys more? Doug, we don't care about this. Let's just help these people. Yeah. And they say, how can we track it? Jed was really good at this. How do you track it? You'll see it, you'll hear it, you'll feel it. Right. And then it explodes. So that's how I sort of got into the actual, running a community or building a community. But what put me there was just a progression of enjoying helping people. Right. And the folks around me doing the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I remember we did have a conversation, even though you didn't recognize me at the time. New last name, new haircut, beard. Yeah, not the Samit Patel you once remembered from Admin Studio. But I remember we were at I can't remember what show, but we were at a show.
Synergy. We're at Summit. 2020, right?
Was it at Summit?
Yeah.
And we were talking about the concept that you're building out a community for a software vendor, right? And I remember thinking, like, is that really a community or is it really a sales channel? And that's where, we went outside and we had that conversation around, this is exactly what it could theoretically be, right? All the goodness that DABCC brought for a lot of different vendors for the end user community if you bring that right information and make it specific to a vendor, it's a great way to collect product feedback. It's a great way to create a community around sharing information. It's a great way to do problem solving. It's a great way to crowdsource a bunch of awareness selfishly for iGel.
Yeah.
It's a great, so like all these different things that we talked about, I was like, okay, like that really makes sense, because as far as I remember at that time, I said, I don't think any other vendor has a vendor built community. Like CUGC is built by the community. Microsoft and VMUGs are built by the community. They're not built by the vendor. And if I can remember right, I think I said that iGel was the first one that I remember that actually built out their own community internally.
Yeah, there's probably within the EUC space for sure. I think so.
Fine, within our space.
Within our space, within our frame of reference, absolutely. But again, I give all the respect and to Jed, because he understood the crazy idea of not using these people but giving to them, which is so counterproductive from a vendor, right? It's like, no, we need X amount of people to talk on stage, we need X amount of articles, we need, we're going to give them and we need something in return. Where I pitched, we're not going to get anything in return, and half the people are like, what's wrong with you? And Jed got it, and he was like, he saw that if we do this, what we get back is, it's exponential. And if you look at the iGel community today, that's, now 5 years old. So it's, it's reached critical mass. It runs on its own, right? But these people love iGel. Right. Yeah. They're able to go into, my favorite quote from the iGel community was, sometimes I browse the thread just to see things or to learn things I did not even know I did not know. Right. We're creating the best knowledge base, real time in their language. Right. It's so powerful. And then, it's the theory of reciprocity, right? Where if I buy you a beer, now you have to buy me a beer. Right. So selfishly, we get something out of it too. But it wasn't the goal per se. The goal was to help these people. I also described it as marketing reigns from the top down. They're really nice to guys with money, right?
Yeah.
The guys and girls with money, they'll take them out to dinner, buy them everything, right? But they ignore these people. And I said, well, let's energize these people. Let's make their lives better, both technically and knowledge-wise, right? From what's coming soon, what's coming next, what's already been there, anything and everything. So.
Yeah, I think iGel Disrupt in Nashville was a great show, by the way. I think the Munich one was also fantastic. I think the Munich one was maybe more geared towards our community and partners, whereas the Nashville one was really around some of the customers as well. I think it was a third partners, a third technology alliance partners, and then a third customers. I think one of the things that, and maybe this is a byproduct of community, but these shows are so well received, and, hats off to the marketing team and to Jed. And, he makes, like, we spent probably a couple hours with him, and, he makes everyone feel so special, like you're part of the community, because I think that's some of the stuff that you guys have ingrained with your community mindset, right? And it's great to see ControlUp adopting it now too, Doug. I'm hoping that we can kind of do a similar thing with Rimo3, but in your experience, like, what's that critical mass? Like, what's that size or adoption curve? At what point you think, okay, I think it's time to start helping our users be more successful? Because that's the point of a community.
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I did love the disrupts. It's really amazing what they're doing there.
Yeah.
And there is a difference between the EMEA culture and the US culture too. And you saw that between the two. But, critical mass of communities, first of all, I don't think there's ever a bad time to do it, because what are you doing? What are you actually doing? New product launch. Here's the betas. We just posted this KB article. Right. Oh, you have a question. Let's see if we can help you. If we can help someone in a text message, please don't call support. They're busy with the stuff we can help answer. And we're building this knowledge base. So if you started day one with the community, just saying, hey, come here, we're going to hang out. Imagine what you had in the first year. You have so much, right? Because all you've done is empowered them. If you look, well, how many customers do we need to have one? Well, I don't understand that. You know what I mean? It's like, one.
Yeah.
Right? You need one.
Start somewhere.
Yeah. Start somewhere and get these people, as engaged. right? Engage with you and your, create a family, right? So, and that's part of my mission, which sits on my wall. Is the last part of the mission is with a sense of being part of the family, right? And if you think about, what Citrix is a great example, right? You felt like you were part of Citrix, you love that company. I love that company. Love it with all my, every fiber in my body. Not always happy with them, but I love them and I do anything for them, right? So, absolutely. And that's what, if you give to them, that's what you build, right? So start right away, but do it with the idea for the techie, by the techie, of the techie. Don't do it with the idea of how many users do we have now? How many messages do we have now? How active are we right now? We need this. Stop picking the fruit, let the fruit ripen. And then you'll find that you have something bigger than you ever imagined. And that's what we ended up with IJO. It's like, oh my God, wow.
So I love that concept, right? I do. And I think the reality is everyone in an ideological world would love to be able to say, just start it and let it go and let it become its own thing organically. You were very lucky that you had Jed, Doug. Like, every other CEO or every other VP of marketing is going to look at what's my bounce rate, what's my, like how many clicks, how many posts have been submitted today on my community channel, what's the general vibe, what's my ENPS, what's all of these metrics that kind of take the fun out of the community. I get that they need to be measured to an extent, right? Because, if you're going to continue to invest in something as a business, someone that might be responsible to the shareholders, you need to ensure that they're getting value out of it. But balancing that has become a little bit more difficult than it historically has, because we have access to data, Doug, that we never had before.
Yeah,
right?
I get it.
Voluminous content of data. Like, I love the idea of starting that community, a Slack channel for Rimo3. But then all of a sudden, as and when it continues to build, using a chat GPT, using whatever large language processing model you want, you're going to turn that into meaningful content, right? You're going to turn it into knowledge base, or however people want to consume tickets. I think the challenge that we have now is people aren't investing enough in their own communities to make their customers successful, because they won't see the return. They won't see a meaningful return or a financial return in the first year. I mean, what do you say to folks like that to say it's still worth building that community?
No, I mean, first of all, Jed was huge, but also give huge props to ControlUp. They brought me over, paid me obviously, and allowed me the freedom to build this also. They saw, of course they did see the, what we built at IJO, but every community is different. Every company is different. IJO is a platform. ControlUp is a tool, right? So you're going to have different results. So they definitely got it and are investing in it and allowing me to do what needs to be done to build that, in the correct way. That said, now I forget your question.
my question is, for investing and building it up front now, like, can I say that in a year you might not have any financial benefit? Like, how do you build a business case to build a community as an ISP?
That's really difficult. I don't have an answer for you. I think that, you will start seeing, we started it within ControlUp. We start seeing value right away, right? We started seeing, we have in 4 or 5 months, we had 1,000 people join, right? We started seeing happy people. We started hearing it from them saying, we love the community. Thank you so much. You see the ticket deflection occurring within support, right? Wow. You're seeing the likes within social. The retention, you can map you can map it if you really want to. It's a little bit more difficult, but you start seeing that the retention will go up, because you're creating loyalty. But I think the first year is forget about the numbers. Forget about the numbers. If you want to do this, you have to be committed to, in the first year, forget about the numbers. I'll show you all these numbers. We built a huge analytics thing around Slack to dump out a bunch of things, which I'm an engineer, so it's fun to do, right? But forget about that in the first year, and then start. But if you have a good community manager, I hate that term though, but if you have the right person around it, they'll spot it. They'll see the people, active, right?
Mhm.
But there's so much else to it too. What type of content do you put in it? How do you communicate with people? I mean, all these different things. How do you grow it, right? And to
Yeah.
me, it's also my favorite saying in the whole world is water always seeks its own level, right? Water will
Mm.
always end up, parallel to the ground. So that said, you have to let the community seek its own level too. And you do that by listening. What
Yeah.
we found within iGel is the number one thing people wanted was support, right? They needed support.
Yeah.
ControlUp, we have really great support, right? So the support is actually a lot lower down the line in what they want. What they wanted was information. What they wanted
Mm.
is to stay up to date. That was the number one thing. So completely different. So if I went in there with the iGel playbook, we lose,
Yeah.
right? And you go in there and start listening, and you say, okay, well, we need to provide him with this. So I go back internally and say, hey, KB guys, share this. Hey, beta
Mm.
people, share this. Actually, the beta people came to me day one. And, how can we get it? I was like, oh, I love you. So,
This is
but you want,
successful.
yeah, well, I mean, usually you have to, if you're the customer facing guy, can I please share this info? No. Right, where ControlUp was like, absolutely, which was just a dream come true. And
Mm.
Yeah.
ControlUp's a great company in that sense, in many senses, but in that one in particular is that they really want to share information. They really want to help people. They want to go to the nth degree to make sure that person has has that solution, and not to hold it all to their chest so they can charge more for support or consulting or whatever, right? Which is
Mm.
very
Yeah.
typical for vendors.
When we look at these communities, and you're talking a little bit about the why it works, what was it that really kind of sparked that intrigue of like, yeah, you're an engineer, you switched gears into this more like community mindset? What made it really stick for you?
I mean, it was a small progression. There was at no time
Mm-hmm.
a big hop for me. I go to Citrix. I'm an SE. They put me up on stage. I also wrote a book as a thank you for for the engineers that taught me how to do my job. That book became sort of a little bit out of control. So that put me on the path of influencer.
Mm.
That put me as, vendors wanted me to tell them, so it was one little step after another, but it was never this is my next step. It was just
Yeah.
following, I won't say the fun, but following maybe the passion, the enjoyment
Mm.
of it. Right. But it was
Yeah.
also that path was given to me. I didn't set out for it. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'd do it over too. That's a different question. I'd
Mm.
love to be a great engineer. I still
Yeah.
think the greatest job on earth is to be a great engineer. Right. But it wasn't the path I was given. And that's cool. I love what I
Mm.
do. I play with great engineers.
That's right. You
So
do. I think an interesting thing here too, Doug, is like now, you've started seeing the community start evolving. ISVs are trying to do the right thing by their customers and partner base by sharing information, listening, creating a feedback loop that was typically only reserved, to your point, for the people with money, right? Your biggest 5 customers would have access to your VP of engineering. Now, all of a sudden, whether you're 7-seat shop or a 70,000 seat shop, but with the right community, you have
Mm-hmm.
access. And I think that has made things just so much better. I mean, like the Nerdio community, for instance, I think is one of the most passionate communities. It might not be formalized. I mean, they do have it's called Part Nerd. I think
Yes.
their partner program is Part Nerd, and I saw it. I just absolutely loved it. High five Joseph and Vadim immediately. But when you start thinking about that community, like it is about no one is above solving a support request or answering a support question. These MSPs and even the enterprise partners are just enamored because they're an absolute pleasure to work with. They're there to make their customers and partners successful. And I think that that is a hallmark of the evolution of where ISVs are going. And I'm using that as kind of not a North Star, but as a guiding principle to an extent where we're fortunate enough that we, as a relatively new organization, we have good brand recognition, all that great stuff. We have a great pedigree of leadership, and our team is amazing. But, I always go back to the fact that, are my partners and customers delighted with the experience that they're getting with me? And I kind of use that as the guiding principle, because we don't have a formal community yet. Doug, I mean, when you're done over at
Rimo3
Control,
maybe not,
yeah,
but
give me a
Samit
call.
does.
Give me a call, Doug, when you're done over at ControlUp. But for us, that guiding principle seems to be a thing that every new organization in the EUC space is focused on.
I think Agile did something cool, and I think that if I could be so bold and maybe arrogant from it, or proud, probably the better word is, I think we showed people that it could be done, and there's a huge benefit from it. And but that was not mine doing, not Jed's doing. There's also Sebastian and Ron there, and all these people within the Frederick. I mean, you could just name them that came in and helped. Then all the unsung people too. So, but we showed that it can be done. And I think the world has changed too. COVID changed everything, because we weren't going out to events anymore, getting together. How do you get in front of people? Communities came huge there too, right? So we saw that little bump within IGEL. But what was interesting about IGEL is most communities actually went like this after COVID. We just kept going, right? Which was really great. But we proved that it can be done. And the industry requires it, I think. And for all the reasons you mentioned, a billion more, right? It's love your customer. Right. Yeah. But also think about prospects too. Think about that person that's like, I've heard about this great thing called ControlUp. This is, I'm Benny's talking about this. Benny's awesome. I want to do this. Right. So they join the ControlUp community, and now they start learning about it. They have a place, because if they're not, buying it, maybe they don't get support. Maybe they don't get this. Right. So
good point.
How are they going to,
having a place to learn is very important. That's a great differentiator for sure.
Yeah, you got it. So, some of the biggest customers I met at IGEL were community members prior to being customers, which was, again, you see it, you hear it, you feel it, right? But can you put that in a stat thing? Well, you probably can, but What do you say? You realize when it wins.
Yeah. For a question for both of you, I'm going to start with Samit. Where do you see the community aspect in EUC going?
It's a good question. And it was one that I was going to kind of try to end with Doug on, because I want to know whether or not DABCC is going to come back. But I think you're starting to see, I think we've talked a lot about the principles of where it's going, right? We've talked a little bit about the evolution of it, where it initially, to Doug's point, it was a list of technical documentation, or it was a list of executables and files that you would need in order to be successful with your deployment. And then ultimately it turned into knowledge sharing on IT Forum and appdeploy.com and a bunch of these other ones. And then it turned into slightly more, brianmadden.com, DABCC Radio, which was sponsored by vendors, and it became information sharing across a broader spectrum, it became more educational as opposed to reactive problem solving. And now we're starting to see ISVs being held to account and ensuring that their solution is crafted and communicated back to the partner and to the customer community to solve their problems. So, like to the iGel story and to the ControlUp story and Nerdio, like part nerd, right? It is very much about being able to create a sense of that belonging while still ensuring that you have that feedback loop, and while still ensuring that we have the ability to make them successful. Because ultimately, as a vendor, you're successful if your partner and your customer community is successful. So I continue seeing that evolution that I've outlined becoming even more partner centric, even more vendor centric, to the point where advisory boards are going to be happening on a regular basis with customers, with partners. I believe that we're going to start seeing multi-vendor support, right? There's going to be joint things that we're, like it's a Rimo Nerdio ControlUp story around pre-deployment planning and automation using Rimo3. It'll be Nerdio around the management and deployment and automation around getting those workspaces spun up and delivered. And then it'll be ControlUp around truly delivering a solution on reactive and change management. Is there performance? Is it a great digital experience? These pieces, just at a high level go together, but no one vendor can just provide them all. And it's up to us as a vendor community to put those solutions together and package them up. So it's a really long answer that like I've just kind of outlined, but I see the evolution becoming more solution and outcome oriented, which means that it's not going to be one point tool. It's not going to be a single SKU. It's going to be, you need to solve this problem. Well, here is the suite and the process associated with deploying and managing the suite successfully.
Well, where do you see this going, and what are some of the efforts that you're pushing forward over at ControlUp?
I mean, at ControlUp, we're still May E2E is coming this weekend. It'll be May 4th. Is the first day, and we actually launched it at E2E, and now it's 6 months later is our 6-month anniversary at E2E. It's sort of cool. Oh, wow. And E2E is my favorite. I love E2E. Alex is A1. We're still in our baby stage, right? So we have a lot of work to do, a lot of growth to do, and a lot of help in and whatever before we can sit back and say everything's just hunky dory. I am very happy with it. ControlUp appears to be very happy with it. So that's that's where my mind is right now. I have some other views and some wishes. I don't know if I want to share them with you guys. So, but what I would love to see happen, or what I maybe someday might want to do. So, like I mentioned earlier, you have these dots, right? So, they all sort of connect in some ways. But I would love to see something a little bit bigger. And like Smith said, bringing these vendors together. So there is this, you have the World of EUC, which is a phenomenal community that they built, which is an independent community. There's no, I mean, if you don't know World of EUC, look it up. Phenomenal what those guys have done. Phenomenal. Right. And but maybe we can do something. I am getting the itch to do DABCC a little bit. I started this thing, like I said, January 12th, 1999, with just wanting to learn IIS, or option pack, I think it was called at the time. But I sort of miss it. So maybe I'll do this in the fall. By then the community, anytime you have a new job, there's a hump, right? I mean, you could sit there and go home at 8 or 5,
Yeah.
But now you don't do that. You just work until you're done, and then you can go home at 8, instead of 5, because it's for lazy people. But when that happens, then I think I'll probably get back to DABCC. But what would DABCC look like? I don't know. I have somewhat of an idea, but it's not like fully baked. But I would like to
metaverse now.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. That's definitely not going to happen. I'm too old for metaverse. There's no metaverse in me. There's no emojis. I mean, no, absolutely not. I'm a grumpy. I scream at clouds. I'm a cloud screamer.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm a cloud screamer. So no, but I would love to start podcasting again too. It's so much fun to get on here and chat.
Yeah.
And the way we did our podcast was wide open, right? So let's talk about what you guys are doing and learn about it. And I learned as much because I listened to every single one of them, right? Because I recorded it. So I got that. It kept me in the know.
That's my secret.
Yeah. And then you go talk to someone and they're like, man, you know so much. You're like, no, I just listen to this guy.
I just listen to these people. I just listen to Samit talk to really interesting people.
To me, it's all that in a bag of chips, as I like to say. He's a little bit smarter than the average.
I don't know about all that. I've been trying to solve the same app problem for 20 years, Doug. I still haven't done it. I don't know. Maybe not that smart.
Yeah, well, I have a comment for that, but I'll leave it out too. It was a little bit too complimentary. So
yeah, we will. We'll definitely share that over a German beer at some point.
Yeah.
There, right?
Yeah. When's the next event? VMware Explore? Is that what we're doing next?
I believe, the one in the States in Vegas is August 21st. So that should be a fun one. And then Barcelona is always a good time, right? So let's see where that ends up.
Barcelona is interesting. We have E2E, I think, around that time, and it's also my birthday. And so as I got a little bit older, I didn't want to spend my birthday in Barcelona. Well, I wanted to spend it in Barcelona, not at a booth.
not in the booth.
Yeah. So I last year I spent my birthday at E2E, and it was the day after. So we just hung around Athens, which a kid from Iowa walking around Athens on your birthday. A pretty fortunate man, you know.
Yeah.
Very, very lucky. Very fortunate.
Yeah, it's amazing. But thank you so much for hopping on the podcast with us. We had a great time here, and we'll make sure to share all the things in the description as well.
Hey, well, thank you guys very much for having me. When Smeet asked me to do this, you know, I was like, yeah, of course. You know, Smeet was always one of my favorite guys to come on the show. It was always a good, you know, just like now, he's so smart and so articulate, right? It's you had to pay attention now, you know, which was sometimes you sort of play, you know, you start thinking about something else, right? But with Smeet, you couldn't. You had to pay close attention so you can keep up with him. But he was, all those companies he mentioned, I think he was on the show for each one of those, right? Not Install Shield, but maybe Install Shield.
It was Install
Definitely.
Shield. Yeah, I did Admin Studio.
Was that the first one?
Yeah,
That's
Install
right, yeah.
Shield, Admin Studio. We did together with Penny Grilleski, our dear friend Penny, and then App DNA we did together. And
I was, and speaking of Barcelona, so I'm in Barcelona. This is a great story. We can close on this one.
Yeah.
So life is about luck, and life is about the people you're lucky enough to be around and meet and call friends. And I knew Smeet, and we did some work together, you know, at DABCC when you were at AppDNA, and then you sell AppDNA to Citrix, and it's all announced in Barcelona at the iForum Europe show. And as you guys are walking out the door to go celebrate, we just made a lot of money. We sold our company. We made a lot of money. You know, they're just, these guys, smiles are up to here, you know. They're, come with us, dog. We're going to drink. So
and you did.
We went across the street and we sat there and drank, and just the stories. I just sat there and listened, and the stories that went around. I'll never forget it. It's one of the high points of my business life is watching the joy on these guys' face as they just, you know, successfully exited that business. It was
you were a
cool,
part of it. Yeah, you were a part of it. You played a lot of you played a big role in actually like just bouncing ideas. Penny and I used you and probably abused your advice more so than necessary. But it was a great experience. We'll get beers again soon, so I'm looking forward to it, Doug. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you guys very much.